Good afternoon, folks. We are live once again. Let me get everything switched over and we will get right into the 2025 wrap up on the Chill stream today. Okay, we'll put the BGM playlist on. We're doing my BGM playlist for once today. And I see we got a hydrate from Lava. What's up, Lava? Happy New Year. And welcome to the stream. I hope your 2026 is off to a decent start. Lava says got the Switch 2 and also Vengeance. Oh, nice. You have to let me know once you start digging into the game. It's a good time. I really do need to go back to that at some point. Maybe run through New Game Plus and try and get some of the other endings. Okay, so here's how we're going to do the stream this year. Lava says my dishwasher and oven need to be fixed. It's not a good start. Hey, at least you're getting that out of the way now. Appliance maintenance is never fun, but unfortunately it's something you gotta just deal with and get through. You're still at the beginning. Okay. Well, I'm sure you'll have a good time. Vengeance was great. Okay, just like we've done for previous years for the wrap-up, I have prepared a slideshow of primarily games, and we're going to go through the list of things that I streamed over the last year, and mixed in are some music releases as well. So we'll talk about all that, and then depending on how long that takes, I want to do kind of like an informal, not award show, but an informal summary of what I thought were the standout properties this year, kind of like a best of. Real quick, let me see if I can. There we go. I was wondering why that was there. Okay, so if I turn on the slideshow, and I can tab through these. So there's going to be some overlap from last year as far as what I streamed, and with the exception of a couple things that have been kind of just ongoing throughout the years, I've mixed in some of the ones just kind of going from where we started with streaming and then proceeding chronologically throughout the year. So towards the end of 2024 into early 2025, we were still streaming Monster Hunter Rise Sunbreak before Wilds came out. And by this point, we were kind of getting ready for the release of Wilds, and so it was mostly just endgame grinding. I very much enjoyed my time with Monster Hunter Rise / Sunbreak, or Rise Break, they call it. There was tons of content, and I didn't even do everything I fully wanted to do before Wilds came out, but I could see myself going back to Sunbreak at some point. But this was the last several streams of doing endgame grinding, because shortly into the new year, I want to say, was it February? Monster Hunter Wilds itself launched. And I have streamed this one off and on throughout the majority of the year. And I figured I'd do kind of like a summary of my thoughts on Wilds, because it just got its last piece of main content, with Gogmazios being released a couple weeks ago. I think Monster Hunter Wilds is a good game for a base Monster Hunter game. I think this one is probably where I've spent some largest amount of time in a base Monster Hunter game before an expansion comes out. I'd have to go back and look at the hour totals, because I did play through both World and Rise twice on two different platforms, and I only played through Wilds once on one platform. But I also think, even though I really enjoy Wilds to this day, I think it's one of the most flawed base games that they've come out with, purely on the performance side, which I know is an argument that's been beat to death now. Thankfully, I didn't have any crippling problems trying to run this and stream it, but it definitely didn't run ideally. And I haven't tried yet. I might do another test session somewhat soon, kind of show off what the last bit of content was that was added with both GOG and Arch-Tempered Jindahad. But in style, presentation, gameplay mechanics, and everything, aside from performance, I thought Wilds did very well. I do think the kind of story mode is basically like a giant tutorial. It's kind of easy, but I think it's one of the best entry points to get into the series for people who are curious about Monster Hunter. And Wilds does a pretty good job of explaining and kind of guiding a new player along. With it being more or less content complete, there's a minor update in February that adds one more Arch-Tempered with Arkveld. But with the last update being the last major content push for base Wilds, I think I would give it a rating on the 1 to 10, maybe 7.8. I've really enjoyed my time with it, and I'm not done with it yet. I'm not ready to put it down, and I think I'll probably just be playing the base game up until the expansion inevitably comes out. But the performance definitely brings it down a bit for me. The gameplay, I think, is fine. The difficulty didn't really bother me, and in high rank, they've introduced so much additional stuff that the game is not a cakewalk anymore. It's actually pretty hard at the higher levels with some of the stuff they've added. So, based on the overall amount of things I like about the monster roster, the updates to the weapons, which I think are all very good. Not perfect, but I'm fairly certain, as they started releasing optimization stuff with the last update, and then I think this month and next month, the performance is going to be a minor problem at some point. It just sucks that for a lot of people on PC who had decently powered hardware, they couldn't play the game, and that's definitely not good for a AAA title. But I'm still very excited to see what happens with Monster Hunter. It's my favorite series. I talk about it all the time, but we'll just have to see what comes out. And Stories 3 comes out in a couple months in March, and I'll definitely be playing that and streaming it here. So more Monster Hunter in the near future for sure. Next up on the content list for 2025, we started playing through Factorio here on stream. And throughout the time I've been here on Twitch, we have streamed a couple different factory auto sim type games. I think Dyson Sphere Program was the first, then Satisfactory, and then most recently in 2025, we started a playthrough of Factorio to kind of show off where the factory auto sim genre of games really sort of jumped off. It's been around for a while, but I think Factorio is kind of considered the grandfather of modern factory auto sim games. And Factorio is one of my favorite in the genre. And I want to say our save for the game was probably close to 200 hours on stream, which isn't trivial, but for the amount of time you could sink into a game save going from start to end, you can easily get into several hundred hours if you're going slow. But I do want to return to our save in Factorio because we didn't beat it. We didn't get through all of the content and see everything. We're getting ready to check out one of the last new planets when we took a pause on the playthrough. But it will return at some point. I don't know if it'll be dedicated so much as checking in on where it's going. But Factorio is probably one of the most technically complex games that I've played on stream here. Just because it being factory auto sim, there's a lot to kind of explain and a lot to learn. And what we saw playing through it on stream within the last year was me learning a lot of the new content that had come out with the major expansion that it got. think it was in fall of 24. And so there will be more Factorio at some point. There's still quite a bit I want to see and do. But hopefully, even though it's a technically complicated game, you folks at least found it interesting to hear me talk about how the game works and how you go about building and trying to optimize. I'm not an expert. Some of my peers out here in the streaming world are much more adept at the game than I am. But I did enjoy my time playing through it and talking about it on stream. So there will definitely be more Factorio in the future as well. Okay. Let me double check. Before we get to SMT5, I think I forgot to add one. Let me copy it from a previous year because it's one I did want to talk about. We'll call this B, and it should show up in the rotation now. Oh, I know why. Let me fix this and add it in. Put it further up in the order, and then I can tab to it. There it is. So in addition to, I think, a good portion of 24, in 2025, we spent a lot of time in Elden Ring, playing through the game, going through both the base game and the DLC. And the reason why I wanted to talk about this one, for obvious reasons, is throughout the entirety of the time streaming Elden Ring here on Twitch, I was running through it with Red Dragon, member of the community, content creator, and friend of mine. And going through Elden Ring was a lot of fun. I had kind of done half of the game when it originally came out and forgot to go back and finish it. And so Red Dragon and I went through, with his guidance, all of the mainline content, a good majority of it, some of the optional stuff, and all of the DLC. And I really enjoyed my time with Elden Ring. I would like to get back to it at some point to check out some of the stuff that I didn't see. It is a little bit tough, though, because as the community probably is well aware, earlier in summer of 2025, Red Dragon suddenly passed away. And it was very out of the blue and shook things up across the different communities he was a part of. And for that reason, it's a little bit kind of bittersweet to think about Elden Ring because of all the time we spent going through it. And so that was definitely one of the challenging parts of the year. Again, unexpected. No one saw it coming, but I do think we had a lot of fun, not only streaming Elden Ring, but a lot of the other collab type stuff that we did. So I definitely want to dedicate the playthrough and probably a good portion of this year's content to Red Dragon's memory, not only for my community, but for like Wazi's community and Bits' community and everyone else where he was an active participant. But yeah, I think Elden Ring, I didn't really want to get into Night Rain too much, especially since it was kind of more competitive. But the base game, I would like to kind of go back to, maybe not for content, just in my own time and see more. Because I think the playthrough for us going through Elden Ring was like a little less than 100 hours. It really took a decent amount of time to get through, but it was fun. Next up on the content list of games we streamed and played through in 2025, we have Shin Megami Tensei 5 Vengeance, the sort of expanded version of the game that was released on pretty much every platform earlier in the year, and what Lava and I were talking about earlier on in the stream. SMT5 base game, I played through on Switch when it originally came out. Really liked it. SMT series is one of my favorites. And so playing through 5 Vengeance on stream, starting over, completely new save, and I was just explaining this to a friend of mine over the last couple days. The expanded version Vengeance felt like a very different game. Functionally, it was the same game with kind of a different progression, some different areas, different factions, but between it being a decent amount of time since I played base SMT5 and all the stuff they added, Vengeance again felt very fresh, and I really enjoyed my time playing through it. It was decently challenging. I honestly do not remember which ending we got. I think we were trying for the neutral ending, but I honestly don't remember which one it was, or if we ended up accidentally choosing a faction ending. But overall, I would say if you're a fan of the SMT type franchises, whether it's the mainline games or the spin-offs like Persona, if you think a kind of analysis and debate ideologically and theologically is interesting, then SMT5 Vengeance would definitely be something I recommend checking out. And if you're not afraid of a challenge, because it's pretty decently tough. It kind of makes me want to go back and try and do a full playthrough of Nocturne HD, since we stopped when I realized I chose the wrong version to play through. But we'll see. Next up in the list for content from 2025, we have the first music release of the year, which was not a full-length album, it was an EP. So 5 or 6 tracks overall, but that was 329 or 329. And this was a release that I've been working on from a bit in 24 with the intention of releasing it in 2025. And to give people a little bit of history who might not have been there when this one came out, because I didn't do a full release stream for 329. I just put it out there, and it was there forever on the internet. The reason why it was called 329 is because all of the composition for the BGM tracks in this release were using a specific synth on my synthesizer that I really like. It's synth number 329. And folks that have been by the jam streams and have been around when we've talked about music and the different instrumentation when I try and put these things together have heard me talk about how I think 329 is my favorite of the instrumental synths on my particular synthesizer, because it has a very kind of video gamey, like semi-chip tuney sound, and the instruments sound very similar to the instrument sets that company Sunsoft used in their old NES games like Blaster Master and Fester's Quest, and other ones that they made use a very similar type of bassline synth and regular melodic synth, and my synthesizer just so happens to have something that mimics that very closely. So all of the tracks that went into 329 use that synth, and the idea was that it was supposed to sort of be a progression, like you're playing through a bunch of themes from a video game with a decent amount of inspiration taken from Blaster Master, which we'll get to a little bit later in the lineup here. But I would like to do some more experimenting around with tracks that primarily feature that instrument. In fact, there's some that didn't make this particular release that I think if I were to flesh it out into maybe like a full 12 or 15 track album, there'd be a whole bunch of different things that could kind of fit into different styles and maybe telling a rough story through the tracks using that instrument. And so we'll have to see. I will say, as we get through the different slides here, This year was probably the least amount of music by volume that I released, and that was partly intentional because I didn't want to just churn out BGM releases just for the sake of having X amount of releases per year. This year I wanted to focus a bit on the non-BGM type stuff, and we'll again talk through the releases as they come, but into 2026, I think I'm going to probably be doing a mix. Again, there's a bunch of BGM projects that I do want to get together and completed and out. And so it'll probably be a mix again, but we'll talk more about that stuff as it gets closer. Oh, Wilds is in here twice. I wonder if the first one on the list would have been the beta. So I kind of did my entire discussion on what I thought about Wilds early on. I think that was the closed beta that I streamed once with some technical challenges. The actual release itself was a little bit later in the earlier part of the year. So that must be why this is here. So we'll just move on. Speaking of Blaster Master, as sort of like a two-off thing we did on stream here, since I talk about it a lot, as we saw with the explanation of 329, I decided to play through the original Blaster Master on NES here on stream, and the goal was to play through it and beat it without using any emulation cheatery, and I believe we did it. It was not easy, but we did it. But playing through Blaster Master, which is again my favorite NES game from the library, it was definitely challenging, and I could kind of talk a little bit as we went through it across, I believe it was 2 streams, how the different things in the game itself, themes, and different ideas shaped some of the stuff that I've worked on the music side, but also just say, hey, here's a song that I really like, and here's some elements that I tried to emulate when I was working on 329. So the intention was to play through this one at some point, and it just seemed to make sense to do that when we had just got through with the music release that was inspired by this game. I actually played through the first Blaster Master Zero before the original, and I still want to play through 2 and 3 at some point. Maybe we'll do them on stream. Next up, keeping the sort of old school and retro inspired theme as far as what we've streamed here on the channel, I played through Cave Story Plus, and another game that I had talked about off and on for a while throughout the different things we've worked on. I decided to play through it once again and talk about it here on stream. And Cave Story, the regular version of Cave Story, since it's been remastered and kind of redesigned and rebuilt a couple times, the original is one of my favorite indie games of all time, and Plus is just kind of more of an upgraded version, and it really does a lot of things well. And my community, a lot of members of my community hadn't seen this one before, so that's why I wanted to play through it. Hey, Didi's here. Didi says, good morning, how's your evening going? Blaster Master's good? It is indeed not morning. But hey Didi, welcome to the annual wrap-up stream where we talk about all the content and stuff we've done over the last year here. And I can't remember if you were here for Blaster Master. I know you joined the community a little bit later in the year, but yeah, Blaster Master is my favorite NES game, but boy, is it brutal. A lot of the more modern gameplay things that make relentless platformers and exploration games easier were not present in that one, but the music specifically is one of my favorite things about it, which you can definitely see in some of the stuff that I've written. Kind of along those lines with Cave Story too. It's a lot. I really like the original and the different adaptations of Cave Story's soundtrack, and so one I could definitely think of, the opening or loading track for my loading screen that you hear when my stream starts is from Shaken, Stirred, and Chilled, which was back in 2024, a chill album that I released. The song that I use for my loading screen now is called Dark and Stormy from that album. And that particular track was inspired by a song from Cave Story. One of my favorite song theme from that game is called Moon Song, and that was a direct inspiration for Dark and Stormy. It's not, hopefully it's not a, doesn't sound like a ripoff, but some of the synth stylings and melodies I definitely took some inspiration from when I wrote that one. Gameplay wise, Cave Story is great. It is also merciless, especially near the end when you have to get through the final several fights and the last sort of super dungeon before you beat it. But I enjoyed my time with it. We definitely had to grind a bit to get through the hell dimension in Cave Story, but we did make it. Indeed, he says inspiration comes from anywhere. It does, that's true. I just try not to wholesale lift and duplicate things musically in stuff that I write. One, because I don't want to just copy someone else's work, and two, the copyright bots out there will immediately latch onto that, and then I have to deal with it. All right, moving on. We have a one-off game that I felt like I should at least talk a bit about, even though I only streamed it once, and that's a slightly older life simulation game called Thrive. And this one was recommended to me by a good friend of mine, and the whole idea is you're kind of like a microorganism, like a cell organism, and you have to kind of build and evolve it and survive in order to progress through the game. Think of it kind of like a much more technically complicated version of the cell phase in Spore. Thrive is cool, and it's got a lot of really neat ideas. I just feel like I'm too stupid to figure it out. We played through it on stream, going in completely cold, not knowing anything about the game, and it was complicated. Apparently, some of the recent updates smoothed it out a bit, but it is a game that I feel like you need to kind of know a bit about, maybe genetics and stuff, to really understand the nuance. Didi says, like Evo on the SNES, sort of. It would be kind of like Evo if you didn't progress through different periods. You never leave the cell phase. It's just you go through more iterations of changing conditions as you try and design your organism to be able to survive and thrive, like the title of the game. But there's a lot of kind of complexity to like how you look at the genetics and customize things. I was telling my friend who played it as well, I said I went into the game like an artist instead of like a geneticist. So I said, well, what's going to be functional but also look cool on this organism I'm designing? That philosophy does not get you very far, because you have to sort of think, how am I going to adapt to dealing with this, or be able to survive this particular condition that's coming up, etc. Didn't do that, and so I hit walls kind of early on because I just wanted to create something that looked cool, and the game's like, no, you need to be more practical in your application. And so I may go look at the updated version at some point, but it's kind of one of those games where I felt like I'm not getting the core concepts, but I like the idea. And so that's why we only streamed it once, because a lot of it was me trying to talk through and figure stuff out, and I don't know if it was the most entertaining thing to watch. Moving on, another game that we streamed this year from start to finish was Raidou Remastered, The Mystery of the Soulless Army. And this might have been about the time when I met you, Didi, because you were streaming this too, and you beat it before I did. But this kind of rebuilt version of an old PS2 game, which was originally Devil Summoner, and I think it was a really long title. It's like Raido Kuzunoha versus the Soulless Army, or something like that. And then it was kind of rebuilt and remade and updated and released everywhere. I really enjoyed Raido Remastered. We talk about spin-offs under the SMT umbrella of brands. I did not think we were going to see a remastered or rebuilt version of the Devil Summoner games, because I don't think were commercially successful. I played through the original on PS2, but I don't think I beat it. But it was a little bit clunky back in the day, but still a really unique experience compared to things like Nocturne, which was my first SMT game, mainline SMT game, and then Persona 3, which is, I think, later. But reimagined or kind of rebuilt, Raido Remastered streamlined a lot of things that made the original clunky, and I felt like it was a much better, more polished experience. Plus, they had the addition of voice acting and just sort of smoothing out a lot of what went into the concepts of the game that made it different from your Personas or SMTs. And so I'm hoping they do the same treatment for the second one, because I didn't play the second one, which was King Abaddon, but I think some of the concepts from that one that were kind of improved made it into this updated version. Didi says, I got bored with the PS2 one a few times, but Raido Remastered is night and day difference. Yeah, I think streamlining the game, improving kind of its pacing, and then making it so that a lot of the grind is a bit more kind of practical for building teams and whatnot. It just felt like you weren't in limbo and there was no periods where the game dragged or you're trying to figure out what to do. Like it was a little bit linear, but there were things you can kind of do. There were side missions, side quests, and whatnot. It just seemed more balanced. And yes, the combat was definitely improved as well. I don't think the original had all of the like parrying and fast dodge stuff. The combat itself felt like a character action game, just a bit more simplified. So like something like, DMC, but a bit more simple. And it was very fun. I liked the combat a lot, and I felt like the game didn't really get cheap. Some of the bosses could flatten you with one attack if you weren't careful. But overall, much improved. So if you're a person who remembers the PS2 version or played it or bounced off it, I think Raido Remastered is definitely worth checking out. Like I said when we were playing through it, and Didi, if you ever have any history with this and want to chime in, feel free. But if they gave this treatment with Raido Remastered to Digital Devil Saga and just gave us episodes 1 and 2 into one HD remastered package, that's a day one. Day one, all my money, take it now. Similarly, if they were to bring back the Devil Survivor games from handheld, I think that would be really cool. I think Atlus will do it at some point. They seem to realize that their resurrection of old games does go over decently well, as evidenced by how many times they've remade Persona 3 and 4. But Digital Devil Saga, that is my hope. And if it's going to come out, it's going to be out of the blue with no press. They're just going to say, here it is on everything. But we'll see. I was telling same friend of mine I was talking to about how I'm playing through the third Etrian Odyssey game on Switch, because it was part of the collection I bought maybe a year or so ago. And those were games on the DS and I think later on the 3DS with the later ones. But the adaptation of a dual screen game into a single screen thing was very, very well done for the Etrian Odyssey collection they did. So that means they could do the same thing with Strange Journey, SMT. They could do the same thing with Persona Q. all those games that were on handhelds before could definitely be kind of remastered and retooled for things like Switch or on PC. So you never know. I never played Persona Q. I have the box set that I bought, the collector's set, but I never opened it. I think I was on my way out of using my handheld stuff when I got that one, but I heard it was good. I'd definitely pick it up and play it on a modern system if it were released. So we'll see. We'll see what Atlus does, but their properties were definitely have a pretty big draw. Okay, moving on. Next thing from the content list for 2025. This was a little bit later in the year. We had the release of a single. This was The Mischief. And this is the first non-BGM release for the year, and it won't be the last. The Mischief was a song created for a friend of mine, one bird-based, I guess he's like a VTuber, but he's a PingTuber streamer, Bitsblight, who pops in every once in a while here. I made this song as sort of like a hype song for him, since I had done the same for some of my other peers. And The Mischief was an interesting experience in taking a more fleshed out beat and adapting lyrics and everything, structure around it, instead of kind of the more short, simplified vocal tracks I'd done before. And for those that were there during the re-debut stream, I showed off the remix for this song that it's going to be part of the next major release I'm working on. But I do want to focus on a lot more stuff like this that's not strictly BGM type content, but it's slow going because I still am not super adept at things like producing and mixing. But doing more projects like this gives me the chance to practice. And so I think the Mischief went over pretty well. And there'll definitely be more stuff like that coming in the future. This was released, now that I think about it, when it came out, it was released on streaming as part of a single release instead of just a track, because I included the instrumental with it. And I definitely think for smaller releases, I want to do something similar where if people want like an instrumental track, then it's just bundled with the release and then it's there. Didi says building a skill takes time. That's definitely true. And I feel like I'm always still learning and improving, but the quality of at least the music stuff that I've done from the very first release when it was more beatbox stuff to the more recent things that now have like vocal work and lyrics and all that, there's definitely been a progression. So at least there's improvement, but I still have a long way to go. So I wouldn't say I'm done learning and figuring stuff out. Okay. Next up, we have a pretty big one. This has been a good portion of the gaming content over the last year. We had Warriors Abyss, a game that surprised me quite a bit. Like, I think we've talked about before on the streams when I've done sessions with Abyss, but I am a decently large fan of the Tecmo Koei Musou series. I have played a couple Dynasty Warriors games, several of the Samurai Warriors games, and all of the Warriors Orochi crossover games. Let's see, I played Hyrule Warriors, the base game. I've not played the expanded or new version of it, but I've always found those kind of hack and slash, large campaign, historical lore games fun. But to me, I think I've spent more time in the Warriors Orochi series because it's a bit more kind of fantasy. It's non-canon stuff, but it's crossover with the different properties, and you know, it's like the Dynasty Warriors and Samurai Warriors characters all teaming up to fight demons, and it gets pretty over the top and fun. But Abyss, which came completely out of the blue, I don't even remember how I found out about this one because there was no press, no hype, or anything leading up to it. I want to say I was looking for Muso games that were released on Steam at some point, and then this one just popped up, and I had no idea what it was. And so I decided to just check it out. I think I played the demo or just did some research on Reddit to see what people were saying about it. But the idea of a roguelite akin to Vampire Survivors or Hades in the Muso type of setting with all of the Muso different characters across franchises with a focus on builds and maximizing skill effectiveness and all that, it checked all the boxes for me, and I did not expect that. And so we've been streaming this off and on. Most recent couple sessions, we're talking about the recent content update that they got when they added some new characters. More stuff is coming from what the devs have said. I think there might be a larger DLC expansion to the game next year. No word yet, but there's so much to do. I bought this game as a Christmas gift for one of my good buddies, a friend that got me into Monster Hunter. And so I was talking to him around New Year's about kind of the arc that I had through the game so far and explaining some of the stuff that I wish I knew and like the builds and build strategy and whatnot. Didi says the spin-off Warriors games play a bit differently, like Zelda, Fire Emblem, and such. Yeah, they're a little bit different focus compared to kind of like the more like commander military campaign based ones from the other main Muso series, but it's still the same kind of idea, right? You take the characters in, kill a bunch of dudes, get upgrades and different things. And so like there's been a bunch of them. There was a Fist of the North Star game. They might have done a Berserk game, but the Muso like Warriors properties touches a lot of different franchises. And again, a lot of them are pretty mindless fun. I do like the historical lore and stuff behind the, historically accurate to some extent ones. But Abyss kind of takes all of that and makes it purely focused on how you're building your characters both in run and in the meta progression. And the level of scaling difficulty is something that I thought was pretty interesting because if you're farming on, like the 5th difficulty tier in the normal mode and going through and just trying to figure out what characters you like, once you dial in a character you want to build and focus on that character, then you start trying to take them into the other modes and the upper difficulties. And it's a type of grind that I like that I don't really get tired of. And as they add more things to the game, whether it's modes, levels, characters, or whatnot, I feel like Abyss has a lot of potential to be a game with a long lifespan, at least for me. Like, you folks are probably realizing and seeing when I stream here on Twitch, but I like grind in general as long as it's interesting and can be applied towards like functional mechanics. There's a reason why I haven't played a Disgaea game on stream, because that playthrough will be like 500 hours because of all the grinding you can do in Disgaea. I love the series quite a bit, but they're games that I have to play like on the go and portably. Playing it for content would probably just be monotonous after a while. But I think going forward, my plan is to continue working with Abyss. I was able to test this game on my laptop, which has a much better GPU than on my current computer and the same amount of RAM. And I wasn't getting slowdown issues playing it on my laptop. So I might need to look at the settings and see, because we stream this many, many times throughout 2025 with my model running at 60 and at pretty max settings in the game itself, and we didn't have any slowdown issue. And then the last 2 streams, or the last one, the most recent Abyss stream, it was chugging, and it's never done that before. So I need to look into that and figure out if it's a settings problem or if the recent build is causing performance issues. So I'll figure that out and see if I can solve the problem before we stream it again. But we can go ahead and move on. Next up, we have another music release for the year. This is the second non-BGM track that I released. This one was poisontype.exe, which was a theme/hype song for one of my other streamer peers. This one was for Wazi of the Toxicure Empire. And I have done a couple different sort of hype theme songs for Wazi over the years as, presents and just to do something for one of my peers. But this one was a similar experiment to the Mischief in that the track was a lot more fleshed out and kind of more complete compared to some of the other more simple ones I've done in the past. And so what I did was I took the original version of this song, which was called just Poison Type, that I did. It was on YouTube. It wasn't part of an official release because back then I was still learning how to put songs together. But I repurposed the lyrics from the original Poison Type, and then I structured it into a more fleshed out song with like a chorus and whatnot. And then that's how we got poisontype.exe. I think it turned out decently well. Wazi's community seemed to like it. It's just kind of a fun thing for their community to be able to see with shout outs to community specific memes and jokes there. But it served as a good opportunity to learn a bit more about, again, recording, mixing, and whatnot that I could apply to future releases. And this one, I don't remember if this one was released as a single with the instrumental. I'd have to go look on Spotify. I think I did the instrumental for this one, but it was set up similar to the Mischief. And so I definitely want to do more stuff like that. All right. Moving on, we are getting into the later part of the year. And I didn't have a separate piece of game art for this one, so I just took the original from the original NES box art. But we started a playthrough of The Legend of Zelda 2, The Adventure of Link Remastered. Again, this is just the base one from the original game on NES. But we played through a fan-created, again, it wasn't a ROM hack as far as I know because it was sort of built from the ground up and coded uniquely. But Hoverbat, I think was the person who created it, basically remastered and updated the original Zelda 2 from the NES with a lot of modern ideas and tweaks and things that vastly improved the experience. I know Didi also streamed this one. We were sort of doing similar content for a while, just coincidentally. I don't think she and I ever talked about this one before I started playing it. Didi says, I believe the game was made in Game Maker from the ground up. Yeah, and instead of taking an existing ROM and then just swapping out assets and doing other things, it was a lot more of a complete rebuild of this old game. And I was very surprised by this one. Again, it had been on my radar and I forgot about it, and by the time I remembered and decided to try it out, it had been out for at least a couple years, but I've been getting kind of systematic updates to the version and adding stuff being added or tweaked. But I really enjoyed Zelda 2 Remastered. The overall experience, having played the original, was improved in a lot of ways. D says, I saw you streaming it and wanted to replay it. Okay, that would explain why. But yeah, I know I could kind of pick your brain for things since you'd played through it before. But very surprising, and I still haven't gone back, Didi, since we talked about it. I haven't gone back to beat it again. I was really demotivated when I lost my save file on stream. I will go do it at some point. That way I can take a look at the New Game Plus and see if there's more content. But yeah, you could see it on the last time I streamed it. Me get through the end of the game and then realize that I selected the option to just reload my save, which was a little disappointing, but that's not really the game's fault. I would say the overall experience start to finish was very good. And if you're, I don't know if Lava's still here, but we had some discussion about if you want to experience Zelda 2 and you don't want to torture yourself by playing the original, play the remastered version. It's free and it's a very good experience. Didi says, a bit more post-game content, but not too much. Interesting, though. Yeah, I definitely want to see that. So I'll probably do that on my own time. And at least see what was part of the additional content. Alright. Next up, we have something that I did want to throw in here to talk about, even though it wasn't necessarily my content so much as something that was a big event for the year. Didi says Zelda 2 Remaster is the way to go. I agree. I will continue to tell people that they should be playing that game. This particular image that you're seeing on screen here is promo art that was part of the Extra Life campaign that I was a part of for 2025. This was a campaign that Wazzy and Matt of the Toxic Gear Empire have done every year for a long time. I think over a decade now, where they organize content and content creators over a weekend to raise money for the Alberta Children's Hospital. And when I first met them several years ago, I had contributed and participated as, a virtual person before I really knew them a lot or knew them well. And now, since I've become good friends with them and the rest of the content creators that are part of this group, I've been able to go and participate in the Extra Life event in person. And that was why I was up in Canada in October for the event. And so we structured over, again, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and technically Monday, with a bunch of different games and things that we're streaming amongst all of our peers that were there on site or jumping in virtually. And it was a really good campaign. We raised a little bit less than $7,000 USD to put towards a children's hospital. And I think the community, between all of our different shared communities, had a lot of fun seeing all sorts of stuff we played. There was a bit of pain as we did kind of like a Hot Ones thing near the end. And overall, it was a really good time. I'm glad I had the opportunity to help participate in something that was for a good cause and do that with friends while having fun at the same time. And so some of the rewards from the actual fundraising campaign are still things that we're working on in the background. There's some things that the stretch goals from the community hit that have not been done yet. And so there's still some other stuff related to the event that I'm sure will come up. And as I learn more, I'll be sure to pass notification on to our community to say, hey, we're doing a thing from the event. Usually it's going to involve suffering of some sort. So I'll make sure to let everybody know when we start getting that stuff together. I just noticed something with this picture. Oh, I know why. I put the watermarked one here. That's okay. You could see in the actual image itself, the promo art, which was part of the donation tiers. This was turned into a postcard and sent out to people who donated a certain amount. But let's see. On the art itself, all of us that were involved in the event were memorialized in the a shot here playing Mario Kart. And this is actually my background right now. It's a really cool image. It was drawn by a friend of the channel and fellow artist, Pwups. They did from start to finish, made the ground up concept, and the art turned out extremely well. So shout out to Pwups for their contribution on the art side. And so that was Extra Life. Again, I think next year or this year for 2026, it's going to be kind of a collaborative online event instead of an in-person one. And so again, I'll let people know once things related to the event for 2026 start being planned and happening, so that you can tune in and potentially donate to a good cause. All right. Next up on the content list, getting to the later part of 2025, the last music release for the year. This was the Halloween project. This was the Blood Moon Rights remixes. The first remix album I've ever done, and a bit of a different departure from how I've done music creation up to this point. For this project, I wanted to remix all of the tracks for Blood Moon Rights, which was a Halloween project from 2023. And the idea was to take a look at the tracks, deconstruct them, and come up with some ideas that would change sort of the feel and overall style while keeping the core parts of the songs together, which is how things usually go for remixes. But I'm pretty happy with how this one turned out. The instrumental tracks, I think, have a distinctly different flavor compared to the originals, but still aren't night and day different. So if you listen to, let's say you're listening to Wandering Wraith, the first track, and then you hear the remix, you can hear the instrumental through lines and melodies, and it's definitely still the same song, but with some different style things thrown in. This particular project was also the first time I've ever done work with more vocal track work. For the two songs that were part of this release, Coven Brand and Eternus Memoriam, were two tracks where they had lyrics that I wrote, and then the vocals, which was done through the aid of having Suno do the singing and adapting my lyrics for the melodies and all that, was combined with another thing I've experimented with a little bit, and more so in this release, which was me singing on the tracks and doing the background vocals. And again, still learning, still getting better, but I'm pretty happy with the way that experiment turned out, because it really changes kind of the complexity of the songs and gives them a lot more push. I do want to do more with that on future projects, both from the remixing angle and also writing and adding lyrics to songs that didn't have them before. But like I said, when Bits and I, he was on my stream because he helped me with the original version of Blood Moon Rights, I didn't want 2025 to just be the year of doing remixes, which is why I only did this for Halloween. I think maybe for 2026, like we talked about on that stream, I'm considering doing a similar type of remix album for the chill tracks, maybe doing a mix. There are some older released chill tracks from things like my primarily beatboxing based songs early on that are a lot more rough and primitive. Fleshing out those ideas more with some of the techniques I've learned and then being able to mix them a bit better is something that I'm considering doing for the chill tracks. So it wouldn't just be the chill albums, but maybe things from the BGM packs or the older releases, and then trying to come up with a more fleshed out version of the songs is something I'm thinking about doing for 2026. I just don't know what the timeline looks like quite yet. My main priority is getting the actual first vocal album of hip hop tracks done. I just am shooting for hopefully the end of winter, but possibly spring. The calendar is kind of up in the air because I got some stuff on the horizon that I'm going to be kind of away for, but there'll definitely be information up when I have projects kind of in the pipeline, and we'll do like the teaser thing so people know when stuff's coming. But yeah, I'm happy with ending 2025 with the Blood Moon Rights remixes. They were fun to work on. Next up, we have a marker here for not necessarily a game or anything, but this was a pretty significant event that happened this year in November. And that was the debut of my current model, functioning like not only a model unveiling, but also kind of like a debut 2.0. For folks who might not remember or weren't here way back when I first started streaming on YouTube, the previous model that I had, I've been using since 2021 when I first started. And over the years, when I decided I was going to stick with streaming and content creation as a VTuber, I started thinking about a new model to kind of get a more modernized, upgraded, kind of fleshed out avatar to use in streaming as a VTuber. And it was, I believe, Dat Blue, one of my streamer peers here, one of the guys I know who streams Factorio, in fact. At some point, I had talked to him about the artist that had done his model. And that's how I got in contact with Blank Ray. And they were the one who I commissioned to design and rig the model that you're currently seeing right now. And that was kind of over the summer of last year. What we did was I did some initial concepting and sketches. As you know, I'm a big fan of sketching concept work like we do on stream here. But I provided some ideas for a potential prototype to Ray, and then we worked from there to flesh out the design that would ultimately become the version of the model that you see here. And so we showed it off on the re-debut stream, talked about the process, talked about some of the assets that went with the model and that I created as part of kind of like a updated brand. It was not a rebrand because I didn't change night and day what I was doing. But 4 years, almost 5 years with one model is kind of long in the VTubing scene. But coming to the decision that I was going to keep doing this for a while, the foreseeable future, I wanted to make the investment in the model itself, and I think it turned out really well. In addition to talking about all of the new content, new assets, and whatnot, as part of the stream, we did kind of like a fun karaoke session where I could show off some stuff that's part of upcoming project releases, and then also just do some kind of vocal practice, even though I had to cut out the sleep token stuff so I didn't get copyright nuked on YouTube. But it was a good time. Didi says that is pretty long in the VTubing scene. Yeah, I know we joke about how old I am, but I am quite literally a fossil in the VTubing scene, with it blowing up probably between 2019, 2020, going in the pandemic. I've been doing it for a while. But it's afforded me the opportunity to do a lot of cool things and meet some cool people and grow a community. So, you know, I don't know for sure how long I'll be doing this, but until I get bored creating content, which is probably not something that's going to happen. Just got to keep trucking along. And who knows? I don't think I'll be looking at a new model anytime soon because this one is still brand new. But I do think I want to work with Ray on some future updates and additional features on this particular model. And so we'll see what kind of stuff plays out there. Didi, Didi says he'll be doing until you don't anymore. That's right. And it's ad time. Good old ads. Okay, let me queue up the next one, and then once you give me the heads up the ads are done, we'll continue. Because we're pretty close to the end of the year, but I still have quite a bit I want to talk about. We've got quite a bit to say about Look Outside, even though we're not anywhere near the end of the game. So I'll kind of talk about that once people get released from the void. The ads have passed. Are your souls free? Yeah, that was a 1 minute break. I don't think I have longer than 1 minute ads set. I guess we'll have to see. But moving on to the next major piece of content from somewhat recently, we have the RPG we're currently playing through on stream, Look Outside. And what I did yesterday while I was eating dinner, I was actually watching CDawg VA. He had a video where he wrapped up a couple of his sessions playing through this game. I didn't watch the whole thing because I think he actually gets all the way to the end. And it's kind of an edited together series of him playing the game. But Look Outside has been fascinating so far. And I've been kind of tempted to go and start another playthrough on a harder difficulty, but I know if I did that, I would eventually get further than I am on stream, so I think I'm going to hold off. Didi says I still need to try this game. I definitely recommend it, and one thing that's kind of interesting about the way it's set up, like I've been playing it, we've done 2 sessions now, so I think we're about 5-ish hours into the game. There's so much that has variables in there that if you were to pick it up right now, Didi, and start playing through it, your experience would not be identical to mine. In fact, depending on what you choose to do and how you choose to progress through the game, you might see a whole slew of things that I didn't. Because I've been kind of beelining straight into the dungeon exploration and whatnot. But if you don't do that and either focus on like playing video games as a component of the game and other things, you interact with different characters and different events and things change. And so there's several endings. I don't know much about them because I don't want to get spoiled. But for example, again, I've played through about 5 hours-ish. We're several days in of the total 15. When I was watching CDawg's playthrough, he went through a completely different set of major events that he focused on, and he encountered characters and party members I've never even seen. And so there's a lot to potentially experience with a game like Look Outside, and that's pretty cool. The gameplay mechanics themselves are very much like old school retro RPGs. Didi says I was thinking I would catch your playthrough after I played it, but if it's like that, I'll check it out. Yeah, again, I'm not trying to convince you to buy the game and or watch me stream it, but from what I've seen, there's so much branching, not only from story but characters and whatnot, that, like, let's say I'm going to be streaming this one next week for sure because I want to keep playing through it because it's fun. But if you were to start watching from session 3 and then you picked up the game, I can guarantee that your first several hours in the game would not be identical to what I did. because the game doesn't force you into a linear progression 100%. It basically says, here's kind of where you need to go, but you don't have to go through things in A, B, C, D, E, F, G order. You can go backwards from Z in a lot of cases. And I've done a little bit of research on the wiki, which is, it doesn't really spoil me so much as tell me other things I could experience. And it's like I'm past breakpoints for certain things that I can't go back and do. But yeah, very fascinating game. It was created by one dude. The sprite design and the overall presentation, it's very creepy and like cosmic Lovecraftian horror is like through the entirety of it. And I'm really tempted to, well, we'll see how long it takes me to clear it one time, but I think I might play through it more than once on stream. We'll see. Yeah, Look Outside was a surprise. This friend of mine, the same one who got me into Monster Hunter that I gifted Abyss to, he told me it was his favorite game of 25, and the sheer volume of experienceable content surprised him too. I said, all right, I'm sold. I'm gonna play through it on stream. That way I can share all the horror with my community. Oh yeah, that's true. Didi says, sounds like it has tons of replayability to it. Yes, I think so. Because I don't think you can just go to the end of the game, save, and get different endings. It kind of depends on what you do throughout the game that shapes the ending. And so my plan is to play through it without looking at any walkthroughs or anything, just to see everything that I can. And then on subsequent playthroughs, get more information about what's time sensitive or what kind of affects your trajectory so I don't get the same ending again. So yeah, we'll be doing more with Look Outside, and I'm sure I'll be talking about it more. Okay. With the Rise Sunbreak splash, that's the top of the list. So with that, we've gotten to the end of the content summary for the year. And what I think I want to do, I didn't prepare anything for this, so it's just going to be me yapping here, but we'll leave it on the Look Outside screen because it's cool. I wanted to do kind of an informal list or ranking of some of the top pieces of media that I consumed over the last year. And so I want to do three main ones that I'll talk about that I wanted to sort of highlight for the year. And then we can kind of open it up for the chat as well if people have their own things that they liked or stood out as far as media consumed for the year. And so we'll start with the first one, the first obvious one, what I'm calling Game of the Year. And I think I mentioned this before on stream, so it's not going to be a surprise. But my Game of the Year, of all the stuff that I played both on stream and off stream, is Warriors Abyss. And that is significant for a couple reasons. One, compared to how stacked this year was with large releases and stuff that I haven't played yet, admittedly, the idea of a somewhat simple spin-off Musou-ish game taking my Game of the Year, that's never happened. In a year where a Monster Hunter game comes out, always that Monster Hunter release has been at the top of my list. And I would say for Monster Hunter Wilds, which we talked about earlier in the stream, it would be second place. But if you were to compare, again, a spin-off game under the radar like Abyss versus a AAA game like Wilds, there should be no contest that Wilds would be the better game. But looking at the time spent and my overall investment, while I still love Wilds and am playing more of it as we speak, I have to give it to Abyss for a game that always had me coming back and saying, I just want to grind some more. I just want to work on some new characters, unlock some more things. And that is very significant. And so my Game of the Year would be Warriors Abyss. I know you folks are probably going to get me tired of me yapping about it all the time, but we're still going to be playing more of it in 2026 until the content stops and there's no more updates and things that are changing. It'll be kind of like the off and on here on the channel. Next up for consumed media, movie of the year. So I don't watch a lot of movies. Depends on what's coming out and if people I know drag me to go watch things. So I don't watch tons and tons of movies. But this year, some people literally dragged me in front of a movie. Everyone was talking about it, and that's how I saw it. And it ended up being my favorite movie of the year, and that was K-Pop Demon Hunters. I think we talked about it a little bit on stream here, but there hasn't been a ton of intersection as far as what I've been working on in that particular property. But that movie surprised me as well. I knew it had tons of memes. It was being talked about a decent amount when I saw it, which was in the spring or summer. Might have been late spring when it really blew up in the summer. But I am a big fan of animation, and I do like well-developed characters and storylines, and I like catchy music. And K-Pop Demon Hunters checked every single box for me. And I think I've seen it at least 4 or 5 times after watching with other people or showing other people as well. Didn't get a chance to see it in theaters when it did that limited release. But that one, again, surprised me. Came kind of out of nowhere for a lot of people. Didi says, yeah, that was good. I thought it was just a movie to promote an idol group, but the movie has depth. Yeah, there's a lot of craft put into it that I was not expecting. And from the art design perspective, and like I said, the story, characters, and music, it was just very, very refreshing in a time where a lot of mainline media seems like it lacks creativity or craft. And it's been really neat seeing the 3 ladies who sing for the characters, EJ, Audrey Nuna, and Rayami. They've been popping up doing performances all over the place. They played at some football halftime show like a week ago. They were part of the New Year's celebration. Was it New York? They did Golden. Seeing like the movie actors who played the characters and then the singing actors, singing VAs, all of them get a lot of attention and press has been pretty cool. And I know there's going to be something else coming in the future, a sequel or whatnot. I just hope it gets the same level of craft and passion, and I think it would be great. So yeah, K-Pop Demon Hunters is one of the few times something that's been yelled at me up and down from the internet lived up to the hype, and the hype didn't oversell the overall experience. Next, I don't watch TV, so I can't really say TV series per se. I watch a lot of YouTube, and sometimes I'll watch things on streaming for like the limited streaming services I have. I technically have access to Netflix again, but I haven't watched a ton of stuff on Netflix. But I did want to shout out my favorite quote-unquote series for the year. And there's really only 2 that would have been in the running. So like streaming series instead of TV series. I'm a big fan of Rick and Morty, and there was a new season in 2025, and I thought it was pretty good. It has been consistent for me. But my favorite streaming series for the year, which is not going to surprise some of you, but it was Hazbin Hotel Season 2. I think I've talked off and on throughout the last couple of years about how I'm a big fan of the Helliverse series. So Helluva Boss and Hazbin Hotel, both parallel because they usually are coming out at different times. But this year was the long-awaited second season of Hazbin Hotel that had been in development for, I want to say, a couple years since the first one. And I really liked it. That series is one I could talk about endlessly, which is probably not something you want, but We talked about things and boxes checked for like K-pop Demon Hunters. Has Been Hotel checks a lot of those same boxes for me, from story perspective, characters, art, and probably biggest for me is music. The as a musical series, both Hello the Boss and Has Been Hotel, has been more so, I would say. The music in season 2 was phenomenal, and I do want to record a tier list for the songs and the characters for season 2. I did that for season 1 way back when I first watched it. I need to do that for season 2. I've had some time to kind of gather my thoughts and figure out how I want to rank things. I hope to be able to sit down and do that while I had some time during the holidays, but I don't know if I'm going to be able to do some video recording. But yeah, overall, I really, really liked season 2 for Has Been Hotel, and I'm very interested to see when it picks up again for season 3, probably in another year and a half or so, where the story goes, because a lot of things happened, and I won't get into spoilers for folks who haven't seen it, but it was definitely a standout for me. Let's see. Next up on media consumed, I did want to talk about music. And as folks who hang out here regularly are probably not surprised at all, but I listen to a lot of music. I talk about it all the time. A lot of properties or things that I like are tied into music in some capacity. But I did have a favorite album of the year, and admittedly, I didn't listen to a ton of different artist albums this year. There were several, both on like the English side and on the Japanese side. But for the standout one, I'm going to give it to Album of the Year. It's going to be Even in Arcadia by Sleep Token. And again, probably not a surprise, because you folks hear me talk about Sleep Token a lot when it comes to music. And I sang some of their songs on the re-debut. But that was their most recent album, and I actually didn't get around to checking it out till fairly late in the year, just because I got busy with a bunch of things. But I feel like part of the reason why I took my time checking the album out instead of jumping on it right at release was because it got a lot of bad press. A lot of music critics and people that review music didn't give it high marks, and it should have been an indication to me that I shouldn't pay too much attention to that, because that band stuff in general tends to kind of not get consistently high marks from critics, just because their music is a little bit more kind of eclectic and blends styles, and whether you're coming at it from like a metal perspective or like a pop perspective, it blends a lot of different lines. And one of the weirdest things about some of the criticism from reviewers, which doesn't normally shape how I perceive something, I like to just make my own opinions, but I saw a couple of reviews call that album boring, and that surprised me, because a metal band that likes to hop between different genres and has a lot of kind of lore and things that the songs are built around, you'd have to try pretty hard to make something like that boring. And so my initial thought was, well, maybe they just recycled what they did on their last album, which was Take Me Back to Eden, which is one of my favorite albums of all time. Maybe they just kind of recycled everything for this new one, and that's why people are saying it's boring. But then I listened to the album, I was like, that's not the case at all. There's some very different ideas and styles and things that they didn't do on any of their previous albums. So I decided I wasn't going to pay too much mind to the critics, listen to it, make my own decisions, and now I really enjoyed it. So I think a good mentality to have is to not necessarily rely purely on things like ratings or critics. You can definitely use it to inform your opinion, but I think it would be better to experience a property before you look at any reviews and make your own opinions first. I didn't do that, and I almost didn't check the album out because I figured maybe it's just not as good and I'll get to it when I get to it. And then I ended up liking it a lot. Let's see, other runners up. for albums of the year. Let me see, make sure I get my years correct here. There was a Japanese album that I really liked, but I need to make sure it came out this year, not last year. This one came out, in 2025. Okay. Runner-up album that I really liked is from one of my favorite Japanese singers, who I think I've talked about when I kind of get on my tangents about Japanese music. But she's a R&B pop singer who's been around since the late 90s. Her name is Misha. And she has one of the most powerful and beautiful voices in singing in any language. But she released an album called Love Never Dies this year that I really liked. Kind of a mix of and kind of like mellow R&B and some kind of pop and some dance stuff too. Good mix of energy, but it was really good. So that's probably my runner-up. Very different from Even in Arcadia by Sleep Token. You have, on the one hand, for Sleep Token, a mix of metal and other genres and kind of abstract lyricism and whatnot. And then you have a mix of pop, R&B, and other genres for a Japanese artist. I still want to come up with some ideas on how to present recommendations for Japanese music to all of you folks in the community in a way that's not going to get me into copyright hell. But if we sort of, again, I'm going to leave the screen here so we can keep look outside and all of its horror. But before we start to wrap up for the stream today, I kind of want to talk about my goals and things that I want to do in 2026. From a content perspective and just overall project perspective, things that I want to do. So on the music side, I've got a lot of music projects that are in various stages that I want to focus on realizing and getting together. So that's new vocal stuff and also BGM stuff, a mix. I definitely want to keep pushing forward on all that. I also want to, again, try and take the methodology for doing the remixes and tweaking previous songs to kind of flesh them out. All that's kind of wrapped up into ideas that I want to kind of continue to build, and we'll just have to see. I'm definitely trying to just invest the time and not worry about churning things out for the sake of just getting things released. So if that results in less releases, but I feel like they're higher quality, then that's definitely the route I'm going to go. On the gaming front, I need to think of another kind of parallel long play to add into the rotation, since I don't think I'll be doing Abyss every single week, and I will be doing Look Outside every week until the first playthrough's done. But we do need something else to kind of go alongside, so I've got some ideas, some recommendations from people, and so we'll probably be mixing in some shorter, maybe a couple stream sessions on some other things, and maybe something longer. But the idea would be to play through things that I haven't experienced before, and then if we need to fill things in the blanks, and maybe add some retro stuff that I can talk about at length. Other things I want to do a bit more on the collaborative side with some of my peers this year. Didn't really do much collabs at all for 2025 aside from the stuff that Red Dragon and I did. And so I'd like to potentially bring back one series that requires a lot more coordination but always resulted in a fun discussion, and that's Salt Table Sessions. We didn't do anything with that in 25, and it might not have been since 24, but I have this series which is like a kind of informal podcast almost, where I get together with 3 of my peers in content creation, Wazzy, Matt, and Pwups, and we sit and talk about characters and character designs and things like that in a roundtable format. And we did several of them. I think think we did 3 or 4, and everybody got busy, so we haven't done one since. But I would like to bring back Salt Table Sessions because the discussion gets pretty live when we're all sitting there trying to either argue or convince each other on what to think with different properties. If you don't know what I'm talking about, or if you've never seen any of the sessions, the archives are on my YouTube channel. They're all the ones we did on stream. I kind of edited and posted over there. For example, the first session we did where we brought characters in was we had to select a property, like a franchise or something, and bring characters to present to the group, and then we do like a critique of the characters and designs. And again, it got pretty live. I brought in Star Ocean 4 characters because that game makes me very, very upset. And we did that, and we did another one where we have to do like mystery characters for someone else so that no one knew what they were getting before he went in. We did one on personas. And so I'd like to do more with Salt Table Sessions. There's one that's, I think, going to be very, very divisive that I think it'd be fun for us to get into. But that and potential other collabs. I'm always open to discuss collab stuff. I know I don't talk about it very often, but I also am pretty bad at reaching out to my peers within the scene because, everybody's busy. And it's a little bit more difficult now because my stupid work schedule limits when I can stream. But we'll have to see. In general, I want to keep doing things so I don't get stuck in like a similar rut, doing the same old thing over and over again. But I think that kind of wraps up the majority of kind of content ideas and project things that I'm looking at for next year. Again, I got to start writing some of these things down and planning, like on a calendar, things like release schedules and whatnot. But it should be interesting. I think 2026 will be a year of, well, I don't want to say challenges, but I think it's going to be an interesting year regardless. And hopefully all you folks come along with me for the ride so that we can experience all of the ups and downs together as a community. Well, let's see. Let me take a look at who's online and we can get ready to wrap up. Oh, I did see we got a stretch render from Lava. Oh. Another year of different things cracking and popping every time I stretch or get out of a chair. I see Blues online. He's playing Captain of Industry, which I think is an auto sim game, but I know nothing about it. So what we can do is head over there and see how Blue's doing on his stream. Let me go ahead and mute you. We will go to outro. And we'll call that a session for today. Thanks to everybody who came by and hung out. Hopefully this year in retrospective for all the things that we did was interesting. We will be back on Sunday of this weekend in the afternoon, and we'll be doing the first Beatbox Jam stream of 2026, which I, again, want to try and do them a little more frequently than like once a month. But if you're interested in hearing me talk about beatbox technique and learning about or contributing to the music creation that we do for a lot of our BGM stuff, then feel free to stop on by. In the meantime, hope you all have a good rest of your morning, day, or evening at this point. Happy New Year, And I'll catch you in the next one. Now let's go see how Blue's doing over on his stream.